Hello everyone. Today we are going to be doing reading of chapter 1.2 On to the summit, we reach the top. We are going to go through this chapter paragraph wise, and then we are going to understand the meaning behind each paragraph. The difficult words will be explained, and we will also understand how the story flows paragraph from paragraph. एक पैराग्राफ में क्या होता है, फिर दूसरे में कैसे लीड करता है, सब समझेंगे. So I'm starting with the reading of the chapter first. When we left Camp 9 on Friday morning, I was determined to get to the top on this day. That morning, I remember thinking I was to get to the top even if I die. I was not afraid to die that day. We set out early, and all the way from Camp 9 to the peak, we alternated. Paragraph 2 and 3, I would take the lead and then Hilary. The man who follows when climbing has a difficult job both in climbing up and climbing down. He is the anchor. The man going in the lead cuts and steps and breaks the way. In my pocket, I had 4 flags. When we were still at Camp 4, Colonel Hunt gave me 3 flags, those of Britain, the United Nations, and Nepal. He charged me with the duty of planting them on the top of the world. So, explaining the first paragraph, we can see that the author, who is Mr. Tenzing over here, has written the story in first person. उन्होंने खुद के पर्सपेक्टिव से ये स्टोरी बताई है. एवरीवेयर यूज द वर्ड्स आई, मी, माई सेल्फ, मतलब वो अपने आइज से ये स्टोरी बता रहे हैं. The first paragraph reads that basically Camp 9, there are various camps on their way up to the summit. वो Camp 9 पे थे on Friday morning, and they decided that they want to reach the top on that day itself. And Mr. Tenzing, who is the author, had thought to himself that he was not afraid to die, even if he were to die when he was getting to the top. The last line of paragraph 1, that is highlighted in purple, we set out early and all the way from Camp 9 to the peak, we alternated. The meaning of the word alternated is to do something in turns. Second para में लिखा है, I would take the lead and then Hilary. As we saw in the last line of the first paragraph, that we set out early and all the way from Camp 9 to the peak, we alternated. इसका ये मतलब है कि पहले the author Mr. Tenzing, उन्होंने लीड ली, वो पहले ऊपर गए एंड हिलेरी उनको फॉलो कर रहा था, फिर उन्होंने स्विच किया एंड हिलेरी ऊपर लीड कर रहे थे एंड मिस्टर टेंजिंग वाज फॉलोइंग. पैराग्राफ 2 में लिखा है that the man who follows when climbing has a difficult job both in climbing up and climbing down. तो ऑथर ये बताना चाहता है कि जो नीचे क्लाइंब कर रहा होता है, who is second, उसके लिए it is more difficult even when they are climbing up the mountain and climbing down. अब ये क्यों difficult है ऑथर बता रहे हैं, because he is the anchor. As you can see, it is highlighted in purple. Anchor is basically a very heavy object that holds a ship in place in the sea. But यहाँ पे हम उसका literal meaning नहीं ले रहे हैं. When we call someone an anchor, हम किसी person को जब anchor बोलते हैं, इसका मतलब ये कि वो बहुत ही एक stable and सिक्योर पोजिशन में है एंड वो पूरी सिचुएशन को संभाल के रखते हैं. जैसे एक एंकर शिप को संभाल के रखता है, उसको स्टेडी रखता है, उसको हिलने से रोकता है, वैसे ही व्हेन अ पर्सन इज कॉल्ड एन एंकर, इसका मतलब वो पूरे सिचुएशन को कंट्रोल करके स्टेडी रख रहा है. तो ऑथर यहाँ पे यही बताना चाहते हैं कि जो पर्सन नीचे होता है, जो ऊपर तो लीड कर रहा है, उसके नीचे जो पर्सन क्लाइंब कर रहा होता है इज द एंकर, बिकॉज वो पूरी सिचुएशन को सेफ एंड स्टेडी रखता है. The author says that the person who is leading cuts the steps and breaks the way. इसका मतलब ये होता है कि माउंटेन आप जब क्लाइंब कर रहे होते हो तो आपको पैर रखने के लिए वहाँ पे ऐसे खड्डे बनाने होते हैं. सो द पर्सन हु इज लीडिंग इन माउंटेनियरिंग, द पर्सन हु लीड्स, वो ये खड्डे बना के ऊपर चढ़ता है और जो नीचे से आता है वो उन्हीं खड्डों पे फिर सहारा लेके चढ़ता है. Now the third paragraph talks about the flags. The author says that in his pocket he had 4 flags. In this paragraph, the names of 3 flags are given. That is, one flag was of the country of Britain, one was of the United Nations, and one was of Nepal. And the author says that these flags were given to him by Colonel Hunt. The flag of Britain was planted because Hillary, the person talked about in the story, was part of the British mountaineering expedition. अब उसकी टीम का एक फ्लैग ऊपर लगेगा. Nepal's flag was taken because obviously Mount Everest is in Nepal. United Nations is an international intergovernmental organization. It has 193 members. अब इसका फ्लैग भी मिस्टर टेंजिंग लेके गए थे अपने पॉकेट में, so that it symbolizes that this was a huge achievement for the entire world. इसमें last line of the third para says that Colonel Hunt charged me with the duty of planting them on the top of the world. Charged me का मतलब होता है he gave me the duty. He assigned me this duty. And of planting them. Planting a flag basically means उस flag को जाके वहाँ पे लगाना. It is to plant. इसमें एक बहुत important message दिया गया है. He charged me with the duty of planting them on the top of the world. This is the first line जहाँ अपने को पता चलता है कि ये लोग माउंट एवरेस्ट क्लाइंब कर रहे हैं, और वो भी इसलिए नहीं क्योंकि माउंट एवरेस्ट डायरेक्टली लिखा है, बट इट इज सेड दैट planting them on the top of the world. These 3 flags are in your care, he said. When you and Hillary reach the top, put them at the peak. I'm sure that you and Hillary are going to do it. I told Colonel Hunt that I was carrying the Indian flag with me, and I would like to be on the top with the other flags. I had to ask Colonel Hunt's permission in his capacity as the leader of the expedition. This paragraph says that Mr. Tenzing told Colonel Hunt that he was carrying the Indian flag also. Previous paragraph में 4 flags mentioned थे, जिसमें से एक था ब्रिटेन, एक था यूनाइटेड नेशंस, एक था नेपाल, and the 4th flag Mr. Tenzing was carrying in his pocket was that of the country of India. And इस पैरा में ये भी लिखा है that the author, that is Mr. Tenzing, asked Colonel Hunt for permission to put this flag, that is the Indian flag also, on the top with the other flags. Now, why did the author ask for Colonel Hunt's permission? Because he was the leader of the expedition. Expedition is nothing but a group of people who are on a journey for a specific purpose. अभी इस केस में आप देख सकते हो कि Colonel Hunt, Hillary and Tenzing were on an expedition to reach the top of Mount Everest. Now we'll be reading the section of Indian flag. Colonel Hunt said, "By all means, I am glad to know that you brought an Indian flag." After 1 hour of steady going, we cut across from the south face and started up the west side, where we had to pass up a steep line of rocks. This was slow and difficult. Once we had cleared these, there was nothing barring our way to the top but a snow-covered incline, sloping less and less as it neared the top. These last 60 or 70 feet up the top were not very dangerous, but we kept up the same steady pace, and we reached the small flattened summit almost together. When the author Tenzing asked Colonel Hunt for permission to also plant the 4th flag, that is the Indian flag, Colonel Hunt gave the permission by saying, "By all means, I am glad, that means I'm happy that you bought an Indian flag." It says after 1 hour of steady going. Now steady going is going at a continuously good pace. मतलब ऐसा नहीं था कि वो पे slow हो गए, fast हो गए, slow, कि continuous अच्छे से pace पे जा रहे थे, in a balanced pace. Author says that we had to pass up a steep line of rocks. Now steep is sharp angle. इसका मतलब कि ऐसा था mountain, पूरा almost ऐसा सीधा था. एक steep line of rocks उनको pass करने थे, which was difficult. Once we had cleared these, there was nothing barring our way. Barring मतलब कोई obstacle हो या something that is stopping us. ऑथर कह रहा है कि एक बार ये लाइन हमने स्टीप लाइन ऑफ रॉक्स क्रॉस कर ली, उसके बाद देयर वाज नो ऑब्स्टिकल ऑन आवर वे, एंड द स्नो कवर्ड इंक्लाइन वाज स्लोपिंग लेस एंड लेस. ये ऑथर कह रहा है कि पहले स्टीप था बहुत, बट हमने जब ये स्टीप रॉक्स क्लाइंब कर लिए तो स्लोप कम होते होते गया, स्नो कवर्ड इंक्लाइन हम चढ़ते रहे, एंड इट वाज नॉट सो डिफिकल्ट. Then the author says that in the last 60 or 70 feet, they were not very dangerous, because author ने previous para में already बता दिया है कि the slope was lessening, मतलब slope कम हो रहा था, flat होती जा रही थी land थोड़ी थोड़ी. And again the author says that they maintained a steady pace, and after a while they reached the flat summit. They had reached the top of the Mount Everest. Continuing, during the last 50 feet from the peak, Hillary and I were moving almost 20 feet apart. We were tied together with a rope. Most of the time the rope was loose, but when we went over dangerous ground, we drew it taut. This rope was a symbol. It tied us together. One could not move without the other. We were not two individuals, but a team. I have been asked many times, who was first? When we were within reach of the summit, I did not think of who was going to be first. I'm sure that Hillary was not thinking that. Climbing takes all your attention. You have many more important worries. What does it matter whether I reached the top first or Hillary? Our main thought was that both of us reached the top. We had to. One couldn't do it alone. If there had been a difference of 1,000 feet between us, then one could make the claim that he was first. But even then, only the man behind him could confirm the distance between the two of them. The author goes on to describe the journey further. He says that during the last 50 feet from the peak, Hillary and I were moving about 20 feet apart. इसका मतलब obviously very clear, the last 50 feet जहाँ से वो थे और peak के बीच में जब 50 feet का ही अंतर था, तो Hillary and Mr. Tenzing were moving 20 feet apart. And author goes on to explain that they were tied together with a rope, and ये rope जब normal circumstances थे तब loose था, but when there was a dangerous piece of mountain that they had to climb, this rope was tight. The same was done for protection against accident. This is a very important paragraph in the story now, which reads that this rope was a symbol. It tied us together. One could not move without the other. We were not two individuals but a team. Basically what the author over here is trying to say that literally rope ने दोनों को बांध के रखा था, but that was not the only meaning behind the rope. There was a symbolic meaning also, where the rope that was tying the two mountaineers together was also tying them in a team. इसका मतलब है कि अकेला एक mountaineer, Tenzing या Hillary अकेले ये नहीं कर सकते थे. Just as the rope had tied them together literally, symbolically also they were tied together because neither one could finish the task alone. Then Mr. Tenzing writes, I have been asked many times who was first. In this paragraph, Mr. Tenzing says that उनसे कई बार पूछा गया है कि पहले कौन चढ़ा. And Mr. Tenzing says that this is not what you think when you are climbing the mountain. ये आपकी priority नहीं है सोचना कि पहले कौन पहुंच रहा है. It is not a race. When you are climbing the mountain, there are other things that you have to worry about. For instance, protection, your safety. आप सही climb कर रहे हो क्या? It is lack of oxygen होता है ऊपर. आपके पास इतना equipment होता है, तो आप ये नहीं सोच रहे बैठ के कि पहले कौन पहुंचेगा हम दोनों में से. Mr. Tenzing then goes on to say that our main thought was that both of us reached the top. We had to, one couldn't do it alone. So the author is saying that Tenzing and Hillary के बीच में कोई competition नहीं था, because like पहले भी लिखा है that symbolically only they were tied together. अकेला ये expedition complete ही नहीं कर सकता था, इसलिए हम दोनों में से कोई नहीं सोच रहा था कि पहले कौन पहुंचेगा, क्योंकि एक वैसे भी नहीं पहुंच सकता ऊपर. Mr. Tenzing, the author then says that अगर दोनों के बीच में, Tenzing and Hillary के बीच में 1000 फीट का गैप होता, अभी तो सिर्फ 20 फीट का गैप है, अगर 1000 जितना लंबा बड़ा गैप होता तो शायद सोचते कि पहले कौन पहुंचा. बट इस केस में भी जो पीछे है वही देख सकता है ना कि डिस्टेंस कितना है. जो ऊपर चढ़ रहा है वो तो देख नहीं सकता कि हाउ मच डिस्टेंस इज देयर बिटवीन द टू माउंटेनियर्स. So basically, Mr. Tenzing is saying that we did not care about who is going to reach first. We knew that we are a team and either both of us do it together or we both fail. When we reached Kathmandu, we discovered that a controversy had arisen. We talked it over, Hillary, Colonel Hunt, and I. We agreed that all the talk was childish. So we made a pact, and each of us signed it in the office of the Prime Minister of Nepal. Each one signed his own statement. I have a copy of Hillary's statement, which I carry in my pocket. It reads, Kathmandu, June 22, 1953. On May 29th, Tenzing Sherpa and I left our high camp on Mount Everest for our attempt on the summit. As we climbed upwards to the south summit, first one and then the other would take a turn at leading. We crossed over the south summit and moved along the summit ridge. We reached the summit almost together. We embraced each other, overjoyed at our success. Then I took photograph of Tenzing holding aloft the flags of Great Britain, Nepal, the United Nations, and India. Signed E.P. Hillary. This is another paper. There is another paper like this in English signed by me. Thus, we will not take part in any controversy. As the statement says, Hillary and I embraced when we reached the top. We did as well as our bulky equipment would let us. I remember saying to him, "We have done it," but we couldn't hear. We had our oxygen mask on. So, this part of the chapter is talking about a pact. A pact is a legal agreement that each one of us signed, that is Colonel Hunt, Hillary, and the author himself, that is Mr. Tenzing. They signed it in the office of the Prime Minister of Nepal. Now the author is saying that he signed he signed himself, and in his pocket he has the copy of the legal agreement or statement that Hillary signed. Now we will read through the copy of the statement. It reads, on May 29th. So now we know that Tenzing Sherpa and Hillary left Camp 9 on May of 29th in 1953. In the earlier part of the chapter, the date was not given, but now we know the date from this statement. On May 29th, Tenzing Sherpa. Now, Mr. Tenzing, whose surname is Tenzing Norgay, is also known as Tenzing Sherpa. And I, over here, and I means Hillary, because this is the copy of Hillary's statement that the author is reading. As we climbed upwards to the south summit, first one and then the other would take a turn at leading. The same we have seen previously, where both the mountaineers were alternating between who took the lead. Later in green, as you can see it is written, we crossed over the south summit and moved along the summit ridge. So they crossed over the south summit. Summit is the top of the mountain. They crossed over and started moving towards the summit ridge. A ridge is basically a narrow line of a continuous chain of rooftops. Now, for instance, if there is a mountain range, then the top part of the mountain that forms a chain is known as the ridge. Then the author is saying that they reached the summit almost together. We embraced each other, overjoyed at our success. Embraced means to hold someone close in your arms with a feeling of affection, basically a hug. So Tenzing Sherpa, that is the author, and Hillary hugged each other because they were very happy that they reached the top of the world. Later it is said that then I took photograph of Tenzing holding aloft the flags. Aloft is to hold up in the air. So as you can see previously in the chapter also, we have seen that the author has narrated that when they reached the top of Mount Everest, there was a photo that Mr. Hillary clicked of Tenzing where he was waving all the 4 flags in the air. And then this letter is signed by E.P. Hillary because Mr. Hillary's full name was Edmund Percival Hillary. That is why it is signed as E.P. Hillary. Now the author, after reading this statement, continues in the chapter. He says that there is another paper like this in English signed by me. So another is signed by Tenzing. Thus, we will not take part in any controversy. A controversy is basically a public disagreement which had arisen because of the question that who had reached the summit first. Was it Hillary that reached Mount Everest first, or was it Tenzing? But both of them in their statements have written that we shall not be a part of any such discussion. As the statement says, Hillary and I embraced when we reached the top. We did as well as our bulky equipment would let us, as it is marked in purple. This basically means that both the mountaineers were wearing suits, they had their oxygen masks on, they had their tank, they had their equipment, their ropes, their harnesses. So they couldn't hug really properly, but they embraced as much as their bulky equipment or their heavy equipment would allow them to. I remember saying to him, "We have done it," but we couldn't hear because of their oxygen masks. They could not hear each other. We will read the part named First Thought. My first thought on reaching the top was a sense of gratitude to God that after having failed 6 times, He had blessed me with fulfillment of this desire I had held so long. I placed on the summit the offerings to God that I had carried with me. This is in accord with my religion. Both my wife and I are Buddhists. I could not kneel because of my clothes and equipment, but I offered a silent prayer in my heart. The offerings were biscuits, candy, and a little blue pencil. My youngest daughter Nima had given me the pencil before I left home. She asked me to put it on the top of the mountain as her offering. It was an ordinary blue pencil, not even a long one, but it was one of her prized possessions. As I put it down, I pointed it out to Hilary. He gave me a big smile, showing that he understood. Then I got out the flags which I had on a piece of string about 4 feet long. I fastened one end to my ice axe, and Hilary took pictures as I held it up. As I had to bring my ice axe down with me, I buried one end of the string in the ice on the top and the other in snow on the slope down below. When we left, they were lying flat against the summit. I was very thirsty. I took out a water tumbler for a drink, but found the water in a metal container had frozen, so I couldn't quench my thirst. I ate some biscuits and offered some to Hilary. I was wearing a red scarf which my great friend Lambert, who was leader of the 1952 Swiss expedition, had given me last year. It was just a year ago, on May 28th, when we were standing at 28,215 feet, that he gave me the scarf. We'll now look into what the first thought part of the story means. The author over here is writing that when they reached the top of Mount Everest, there was a sense of gratitude for God. Now, gratitude means being thankful. So, author and his team was thankful to God after having failed 6 times. Iska matlab, the author, that is Mr. Tenzing, had tried to climb Mount Everest 6 times before this expedition that was a success. The author is saying that he placed his offerings to God that he had carried with him. So according to the author's religion, कुछ ऑफरिंग्स है like हम लोग प्रसाद देते हैं ना भगवान को, तो ऑफरिंग्स मतलब प्रसाद जो हम गॉड को देते हैं. Mr. Tenzing, who is the author, has also taken a few things to the Mount Everest, and he has placed it there as offering to God. The author is saying that he and his wife are both Buddhists, and this is in accord with the religion. In accord मतलब वो जो rules है religion के उसके खिलाफ नहीं जाता. It is within the rules only of the religion that they are making this offering. Author is again saying that I could not kneel because of my clothes and equipment. Kneel मतलब bow down. पहले भी हमने देखा कि author के bulky equipment की वजह से Tenzing and Hilary could not embrace properly because of their bulky equipment, and again there is a second reference to the same equipment that he could not kneel, he could not bow down properly because of the heavy equipment. But the author offered a silent prayer in his heart. उसने मन ही मन prayer कर ली अपनी. फिर ऑथर डिस्क्राइब करते हैं कि ऑफरिंग्स में क्या था. तो कुछ बिस्किट्स थे, कैंडी एंड अ लिटिल ब्लू पेंसिल. ऑथर मिस्टर टेंजिंग की जो यंगेस्ट डॉटर है नीमा, उन्होंने ये पेंसिल अपने फादर को दी थी कि आप जाएंगे माउंट एवरेस्ट के समिट पे पहुंचेंगे तो मेरी तरफ से ये पेंसिल एक ऑफर कर दीजिएगा गॉड को. ऑथर कहता है कि इट वॉज एन ऑर्डिनरी पेंसिल बट इट वॉज वन ऑफ अ प्राइज्ड पोजेशंस. प्राइज्ड पोजेशन का मतलब होता है वेरी स्पेशल बिलोंगिंग. अपने पास कोई ऐसी चीज़ होती है, कभी कोई पेन होता है या अपनी कोई ऐसी शॉल होती है या कोई टॉय होता है या कोई किताब होती है जो अपने लिए बहुत स्पेशल हो, तो दैट इज नोन एज आर प्राइज्ड पोजेशन. Author is then saying he is continuing to describe what he did when he had reached the top. He said that he gave the offerings and जब वो नीचे रख रहे थे ये blue pencil तो he pointed it at Hilary and Hilary gave him a big smile. इसका मतलब he understood that the youngest daughter नीमा ने कुछ तो दिया है and वो उसको offer कर रहे. Basically Hilary and Tenzing were both very happy. Then what did the author Tenzing do? He got out the flags. 4 फ्लैग थे उनके पॉकेट में, which he had on a piece of string about 4 feet long. एक धागा था 4 फुट लंबा जिसपे 4 फ्लैग्स थे. He fastened one end to the ice axe and Hilary took pictures as I held it up. इसका मतलब टेंजिंग ने क्या किया, उनका आइस एक्स होता है. आइस एक्स इज अ स्पेशल काइंड ऑफ एक्स दैट माउंटेनियर्स यूज टू कट द आइस. तो टेंजिंग ने आइस एक्स से वो धागा बांध दिया जिसपे 4 फ्लैग्स थे और ऐसे हवा में उन्होंने उनको अलोफ्ट किया था. याद है, वी सॉ द वर्ड अलोफ्ट he had was swaying the ice axe in the air, and then Hillary had clicked a picture of Tenzing. Now the author is saying that unko ice axe niche lana tha unke sath, which is why he took the end from the ice axe and he buried it. Bury matlab unhone dafna diya usko ice ke अंदर. नीचे आने के बाद the author is again describing the experience. He's saying that he was hungry and he had a water tumbler, but it was a metal container, तो water जितना था उस metal container में सब because of low temperatures freeze हो गया था. तो he could not quench his thirst. Quench का मतलब होता है to satisfy. उनकी प्यास बुझ ही नहीं पाई क्योंकि पानी ही नहीं था उनके पास, वो सब आइस में बदल गया था. So what did the author do? Tenzing just ate some biscuits and he offered them to Hillary also. Again, Tenzing is describing something else. He is wearing a red scarf, which according to the author, that is Tenzing, his great friend Lambert gave him. Now, who is Lambert? Lambert is the leader of the 1952 Swiss expedition. अभी हमको पहले पता है कि first of all the author, this is the 7th time that he is climbing the Mount Everest and he is finally successful in reaching the top. हमने जैसे पहले देखा, he said thank you to God because first 6 times he had failed. इसका मतलब ये जो स्विस एक्सपेडिशन है ऑफ 1952 उसमें भी टेंजिंग वाज अ पार्ट, बट दे हैड फेल्ड टू रीच द टॉप ऑफ द समिट. But during that trip, which is exactly 1 year ago, Lambert, his best friend, had given him a red scarf which he is wearing even on this trip. If you see the date, on May 28th, May 28th is again 1 year exactly before, क्योंकि अगर हम ये लेटर जो लीगल पैक्ट साइन किया है हिलरी एंड टेंजिंग ने, अगर उस पर भी जो डेट लिखी है वो देखेंगे, दैट इज May 29th. इसलिए exactly 1 year ago the Swiss expedition had taken place. I wore it all the way up the mountain from Darjeeling. As I stood at the top, I remembered him and felt that he was with me. I felt absolutely fit at the summit. My mind was absolutely clear. I didn't feel tired. I felt exhilarated. It was a very clear sensation. Below, all the hills and mountains looked like gods and goddesses to me. The plains below looked like so many broken pieces of the map. 2 or 3 people could stand there on the roof of the world if you cut ice. 20 or 30 feet below the top, there was enough flat square for 2 people to sleep. One could pitch one tent there. The summit is flat on one side and steep on the other. There is snow on the northern side, rocks on the south and east, and snowy rock on the west. We stayed on the top a little more than 15 minutes. We were lucky that there was no gale, or it would have swept us off. My next thought was how to get down safely. This part is very clear, self-explanatory, but we'll go through it once. Basically, the author is describing what he saw when he was at the top of the mountain. First, he said that he was very happy and his mind was clear and he did not feel tired at all. Instead, he felt exhilarated. Exhilarated means very happy. Then he described what he could see from the top of the Mount Everest. He said that there were hills and mountains that looked like god and goddesses to him, and the plains looked like so many broken pieces of the map. Then he went to describe the place on the summit where he was standing. He said that 2 or 3 people could stand there on the roof of the world if you cut the ice. 20 or 30 feet below the top, there was enough flat square for 2 people to sleep. You could pitch a tent there. Pitch a tent is you can place, आप वहाँ पे tent लगा सकते हो. He also described how the mountain looked. He said that the summit, that is the mountain top, was flat on one side and it was steep on another. And then author is also saying that there was snow on the northern side, rocks on the south and east, and snowy rock on the west. We stayed on the top a little more than 15 minutes. So both author, that is Tenzing and Hillary, stayed on the top for a little more than 15 minutes. And they are saying that they was lucky that there was no gale. Gale is strong wind. Or else it would have been very difficult for them to reach the top, and had they reached the top, they would have been swept with the wind. मतलब वो हवा से उड़ जाते. तो they felt they were lucky कि उस दिन बहुत तेज हवा नहीं चल रही थी. On the descent from the summit, I was walking behind Hillary. I was following him and holding the rope tightly, and my determination was to make sure he descended safely. I must say that the climb down was more difficult and dangerous than the climb up. If you slipped down, you would go into Kangshung Glacier and there would be no trace left of you. Now the author Tenzing is describing the descent from the summit. Descent is unka utarna. And the author says that he was walking behind Hillary. He was following him and he was holding the rope tightly. And determination was to make sure he descended safely. तो basically author का पूरा मकसद ये था कि वो दोनों safely उतर जाए, and he was very cautious and he was holding the rope very tightly. ऑथर का कहना है कि नीचे उतरना ऊपर चढ़ने से भी ज़्यादा टफ था, बिकॉज अगर आप स्लिप हो गए तो आप कैंगशुंग ग्लेशियर में गिर जाएंगे. ग्लेशियर इज बेसिकली द स्पेस बिटवीन टू आइस शीट्स. तो अगर दो माउंटेन के बीच की जगह को ग्लेशियर कहेंगे, और अगर आप स्लिप हुए तो आप उस ग्लेशियर में गिर जाएंगे, एंड द ग्लेशियर इज सो डीप दैट इट इज इम्पॉसिबल टू कम आउट ऑफ देयर अलाइव. द लास्ट पार्ट नेम्ड मोर कॉशन नीडेड. We'll read that now. Of course, it took less time climbing down, but it needed more hushiyar, that is caution. When we reached Camp 9, my first thought was, thank God we have been spared an accident. And if up to now there have been no accidents, I hope there will be none in future. I had always prayed to God and He had saved me. At Camp 9, Hillary and I were in no mood for any talking. We just attended to our own things. We stayed there about half an hour. We boiled some snow to make lemon water and drank it. When we left, we took only our sleeping bags and left everything else behind in the tent. From Camp 9 to Camp 8, where we spent the night, was an easier job. Just above Camp 8, where the others could see us. I raised my arm with my thumb up. Noise and Lau saw us and their faces flushed with joy. In this way, I was able to tell them of our success. As we got nearer to Camp 8, Lau came to meet us and came up about 30 feet with tea and coffee. Another 50 feet down, we met Noise, who brought us more tea. This tea smelled kerosene. Apparently, it had been made in a hurry, and somehow some kerosene got into the welcome cup. But I thought since the gentleman had taken so much trouble to bring it, I was going to enjoy it, whatever the smell. By Tenzing Norgay from Archives of TOI.